I'm Yvonne, 34 years old, and I once believed family meant unconditional love. Despite my successful career as a marketing director, I carry scars from childhood that never fully heal. Growing up in suburban Boston, I learned the hard way that blood doesn't guarantee love. The day my mother said those words changed everything. I never wanted you. What followed was a years-long journey of quiet revenge that even I couldn't have predicted. Before I continue my story, if you're watching this, let me know where you're from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of survivors and thrivers. My earliest memories of childhood aren't filled with the warmth most people describe. Our middle-class home in Boston looked perfect from the outside. White picket fence, neatly trimmed lawn, and a mother who always dressed impeccably for the neighborhood. Catherine Morgan, my mother, was a successful accountant with a reputation for ruthless precision in everything she did. Her appearance was always flawless, not a hair out of place in her perfectly styled bob designer clothes that were modest yet clearly expensive, and a perpetual expression of slight disapproval. My father Robert was her opposite in many ways. A traveling salesman with a kind smile and gentle voice, he was warm during the brief periods he was home. But his backbone disappeared whenever my mother entered the room. His constant business trips seemed to grow longer each year, as if he too was trying to escape her coldness. From age 5, I remember desperately trying to win my mother's approval. My report cards were perfect. My room was spotless. I even learned to do laundry and help with dinner by age 8, hoping she might finally smile at me with genuine warmth. "Is this how you fold towels?" she would say, redoing my careful work. "I suppose this is adequate," was her response to my straight A report card. Even when I won first prize in the science fair, she merely nodded and said, "Next time work on your handwriting on the display board." The contrast between how she treated me and my younger brother Michael was impossible to ignore. 3 years younger than me, Michael received the smiles, the hugs, the proud mother moments I craved. "My little genius," she called him, even when we achieved the same things. "Mom, look what I drew," I would say, showing her a picture my art teacher had praised. "Put it away, Yvonne. I'm busy helping your brother with his homework." My bedroom became my sanctuary. Pale blue walls with cloud stickers I had carefully applied myself. Books stacked neatly in order of my favorites. A small desk where I would write stories my mother never read. It was the one place I could pretend I was normal loved enough. Sarah Johnson lived next door and became my emotional lifeline. Her mother baked cookies and asked about my day with genuine interest. Sometimes I would sit at their kitchen table doing homework just to absorb the warmth of their household. In elementary school, I threw myself into every activity possible. Student council representative, library helper, even joining the choir despite my average singing voice. Each achievement was another attempt to make my mother notice me, to make her eyes light up with pride the way they did for Michael. Mrs. Morgan Yvonne is one of our brightest students, my third-grade teacher told my mother at a conference. "She has such potential." "She should have potential," my mother replied coolly. "We provide everything she needs." By age 10, a nagging feeling had taken root in my heart. Something wasn't right about how my mother treated me. But children are naturally hopeful, and I still believed I could eventually earn her love if I just tried harder, did better, became perfect. "Maybe she's just stressed from work," my father would say on rare occasions when we were alone. "Your mother has a lot of responsibility." But even then, I knew it was more than stress. The way she looked at me was fundamentally different from how she looked at Michael. Still, I held on to hope that someday, somehow, I would finally be enough for her to love. When I turned 13, the difference between my family and others became impossible to ignore. While other girls fought with their mothers over typical teenage issues like curfews and clothing choices, I was fighting for basic acknowledgement. Middle school brought academic success that should have made any parent proud. I maintained a 4.0 GPA, was selected for advanced placement classes, and teachers consistently praised my work ethic. Yet my mother's response to my achievements remained tepid at best. "Advanced English. That's fine. But your handwriting could still use improvement," she would say. finding the single flaw in any victory. It was during these years that I discovered my passion for art and writing. Hours spent sketching in my room or crafting stories became my escape. My English teacher, Mr. Collins, entered one of my short stories in a young writers' competition without telling me. When I won third place, he was ecstatic. "Your daughter has exceptional talent," he told my mother at the next parent-teacher conference. "Creative pursuits don't pay bills," she responded dismissively. "She should focus more on practical subjects." Meanwhile, my father's presence at home grew increasingly rare. His sales territory expanded to include the entire East Coast, keeping him away for weeks at a time. The tension that filled our house whenever both my parents were home made it clear why he volunteered for every extended trip. "I'll bring you back something special," he would promise before each departure, as if trinkets could compensate for his absence when I faced my mother alone. My 15th birthday fell on a Tuesday. I came downstairs to find no acknowledgement of the day. No card, no small gift, not even a happy birthday from my mother over breakfast. I told myself she was just waiting until dinner to celebrate, clinging to diminishing hope. That evening I discovered her hunched over the family computer, ordering custom decorations for Michael's birthday party, still 2 months away. When I quietly mentioned it was my birthday, she looked up with genuine surprise. "Is that today I've been so busy planning Michael's party? We can pick up a cake this weekend if you want." 2 weeks later, she threw an elaborate surprise party for one of Michael's friends, coordinating with other mothers and decorating our backyard meticulously. High school brought a new ally into my life, Mrs. Martinez, my debate coach. She recognized something in me that my mother never had. Potential, yes, but also the hunger for validation that drove me to excel. "You have a natural gift for persuasion," she told me after I won my first practice debate. "Your voice deserves to be heard." Against my mother's wishes, I joined the debate team. This sparked one of our most heated arguments. "Debate team, that's just arguing for sport. It will make you confrontational and unappealing," my mother said. "It's a respected academic activity," I countered. "Colleges value it." "Fine, do what you want. Just don't expect me to attend your debates." True to her word, she never came to a single one, even when I won the regional championship as a sophomore. The auditorium was filled with proud parents clutching flowers and cameras, except for the 2 empty seats I had hopefully reserved. My victory was celebrated by everyone except the one person whose approval I still desperately craved. As my high school years progressed, I began to observe other mother-daughter relationships with almost anthropological interest. Jessica Barnes became my closest friend, and her home became my refuge. Her mother Laura treated her with a casual affection that seemed as natural as breathing. "Great job on that test, honey," Laura would say, or "I love that shirt on you." Simple affirmations that Jessica barely noticed, but that I absorbed like a plant starved for water. "Your mom is always so nice," I told Jessica once. She looked confused. "She's just being a mom." That comment stayed with me for days. Just being a mom, was that all it took? Why couldn't my mother manage even that basic level of warmth the constant rejection at home began to manifest in ways I couldn't control? Sleep became elusive. My appetite fluctuated wildly. The school counselor noticed my increasing anxiety and suggested I talk to someone. "Everything's fine." I insisted, the family lie so ingrained I couldn't break it even when offered help. Yet beneath the surface, resentment was growing alongside the hurt. The desperate need for my mother's approval was slowly being edged out by anger at the unfairness of it all. What had I done to deserve this coldness? What was so fundamentally wrong with me that my own mother couldn't love me? Still, hope persisted. Every time she spoke to me without criticism, every slight nod of approval became treasure. I hoarded proof that maybe someday things could change. Senior year arrived with the promise of freedom on the horizon. College applications consumed my evenings as I meticulously crafted essays and secured glowing recommendations from teachers who had become my surrogate parents in many ways. My grades and extracurriculars placed me in the running for prestigious universities, and each acceptance letter felt like vindication. Harvard, Columbia, Stanford, Yale. The envelopes arrived throughout spring, each one a testament to years of striving for excellence, despite the emotional desert at home. When the Stanford acceptance came with a substantial merit scholarship, I placed the letter on the kitchen counter where my mother would see it. That evening, I heard her voice from the kitchen. "Stanford, that's clear across the country. The travel expenses alone would be outrageous," she said to my father. "Besides, Harvard has a stronger business program." I stepped into the kitchen. I earned a merit scholarship to Stanford. It would actually be cheaper than Harvard. My mother barely glanced up from sorting mail. "College isn't just about cost, Yvonne. It's about connections. East Coast connections would serve you better." What followed was the first major fight I ever initiated with my mother. Years of suppressed feelings erupted as I defended my right to choose my own future. "This is my decision," I insisted. "I've earned this opportunity." "With our money and support," she countered. "You seem to forget everything we've provided." "Provided you've provided a house and food? But what about support? When have you ever attended anything important to me? When have you ever said you were proud of me?" Her face hardened into the expression I knew signaled dangerous territory. "Don't be dramatic, Yvonne. Not everyone needs constant praise to function." The argument ended without resolution, as most conflicts in our house did. But it marked a turning point in how I viewed my relationship with my mother. For the first time, I had openly challenged her indifference. The following weekend, I was home alone working on scholarship applications when the phone rang. I answered to silence, then realized the call had been picked up on another extension. About to hang up, I heard my mother's voice from her bedroom phone. "No, Sunday isn't good for us. Yvonne will be home, and you know how she gets." A pause. "Honestly, Margaret, between you and me, I never wanted you to have a daughter. The neediness, the drama. I never wanted her, but here we are." The words hit me with physical force. The room seemed to tilt as I silently replaced the receiver, my hand shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. The casual cruelty, the confirmation of what I had suspected but never wanted to believe. It was too much to process. I waited until my father returned home that evening, then confronted my mother in the living room, my voice surprisingly steady, despite my crumbling interior. "I heard what you said on the phone today, about never wanting me." My father's confused expression shifted between us, but my mother's face remained impassive. "You shouldn't eavesdrop on private conversations," she said. "Is it true?" I pressed. "Did you never want me?" Something in my tone must have conveyed that denial would be pointless. She sighed, setting down her book with deliberate care. "If you want the truth, fine. I wasn't ready for children when I got pregnant with you. Your father insisted we keep the baby. I did my duty as a mother. I provided everything you needed. Not everyone experiences maternal love the way greeting cards describe it. That's just reality." The clinical way she confirmed my greatest fear was perhaps more devastating than the content of her words. No remorse, no softening, not even recognition of how such a revelation might affect me. My father half rose from his chair. "Catherine, surely that's not—" "Don't pretend, Robert. We both know you pushed for keeping the pregnancy. I've done what was required of me." I stood frozen, 17 years of striving for approval suddenly revealed as a pointless exercise. There had never been any combination of achievements, any level of perfection that could have earned her love. The problem wasn't in me, it was in her inability to give what she didn't possess. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on schoolwork that had once been my salvation. The physical manifestations of heartbreak were real. Chest pain, nausea, a constant headache that wouldn't respond to medication. My father made weak attempts to mediate, to suggest family counseling or at least further conversation. "Your mother doesn't always express herself well," he offered lamely one evening when he found me crying in my room. "She expressed herself perfectly clearly," I responded. "And so did you by saying nothing all these years. The scholarship to Stanford suddenly represented more than academic achievement. It was escape. I accepted it immediately, informing my parents of my decision rather than asking for their input. My mother's only response was to remind me that California's cost of living was higher than I might expect. Graduation day arrived with family tension at its peak. I stood with my classmates in cap and gown, scanning the audience for my parents. They were there, physically present, but emotionally absent. My mother checked her watch repeatedly during the ceremony. My father applauded politely when my name was called for honors recognition. Neither managed to capture the moment with a camera. Later at home, there was no celebration. No special dinner, no card, not even acknowledgement of the milestone. "When will you start packing for college?" was my mother's only question. "We should convert your room to a home office once you're gone." That night I made a decision. The relationship with my mother had been broken long before I heard those devastating words. No amount of effort on my part could fix what she was fundamentally unable to give. The only path forward was to create a life so full and complete that her absence would become irrelevant. It wasn't revenge I planned then. It was survival. August arrived, bringing moving day and the promise of a fresh start, 3,000 miles from the emotional wasteland of my childhood home. Standing in the airport, I felt conflicting emotions surge through me. Exhilaration at the freedom ahead, grief for the maternal relationship I would never have. My father hugged me awkwardly. "Call when you get there," he said, slipping an envelope into my hand that I later discovered contained $500. My mother offered a stiff, perfunctory embrace that felt more like a business handshake. "Remember to focus on practical courses," were her parting words. Stepping onto the plane felt like crossing a boundary between my old life and whatever lay ahead. For the first time in 17 years, I would be beyond the reach of my mother's cold indifference. Stanford's campus was everything I had dreamed of: palm trees, Spanish architecture, and most importantly, no history. Nobody knew me as this girl desperately seeking maternal approval. Here I could be anyone I wanted. My roommate Tasha was from Seattle, energetic, outgoing, and immediately welcoming. She introduced me to her circle of friends who accepted me without question. These normal social interactions felt almost surreal after years of walking on eggshells at home. "Want to join us for pizza? What did you think of that lecture? Let's study together tonight." Simple invitations that slowly helped me understand how relationships were supposed to work. When these new friends discussed their families, complaints about overprotective mothers or fathers who didn't understand their career choices, I remained quiet. How could I explain that I would have treasured the problems they found so annoying, that a mother who called too often sounded like luxury compared to one who had never wanted you at all? I chose psychology as my major, driven by the need to understand what had shaped my childhood. Each class offered insights into my experiences. Narcissistic personality disorder is characterized by a lack of empathy, grandiose sense of self-importance, and need for admiration. A professor explained in one lecture, describing my mother with unsettling accuracy. The campus counseling center became part of my weekly routine. Dr. Wilson, with her gentle questioning and unwavering support, helped me begin the long process of understanding that my mother's treatment wasn't my fault. "Your mother's inability to connect emotionally with you reflects her limitations, not your worthiness," she told me during one particularly difficult session. Those words became a mantra I repeated on nights when old insecurities threatened to overwhelm me. Contact with my parents dwindled to brief, infrequent phone calls. My mother rarely initiated these conversations, and when we did speak, she showed more interest in the practical aspects of my life than my emotional well-being. "Are you managing your expenses properly?" she would ask, rather than, "Are you happy?" During sophomore year, my brother Michael, now a high school freshman, began reaching out via email. His messages revealed cracks in my mother's perfect facade. "Mom's been really tense since you left," he wrote. "She rearranged the house and turned your room into an office the week after you left, but she keeps the door closed all the time. Dad's hardly ever home anymore." These glimpses into the family dynamic I'd left behind confirmed what I was learning in psychology classes. Dysfunctional systems often deteriorate further when elements change. Junior year brought David into my life. Intelligent, compassionate, and from a family so functional it seemed almost fictional to me. His parents, Tom and Ellen, welcomed me for Thanksgiving, treating me with an easy affection that made my chest ache with longing. "You're always welcome here, Yvonne," Ellen told me, touching my shoulder in that casual way mothers do. The simple gesture nearly brought me to tears. Observing their family interactions became an education in what healthy relationships looked like. The good-natured teasing, the inside jokes, the unspoken understanding between parents and children, all of it was foreign and fascinating. "Your parents are amazing," I told David one night as we walked back to campus. "They're pretty normal," he shrugged. "All parents have their quirks." "Trust me, there's a difference between quirks and what I grew up with," I replied, beginning to share pieces of my childhood I had previously kept hidden. To his credit, David listened without judgment, offering the validation I had craved for years. "That wasn't normal, and it wasn't okay," he said simply. When graduation approached, I made no effort to invite my parents to the ceremony. My father called, sounding hesitant. "Your mother and I were wondering about your graduation. The ceremony will be crowded and impersonal." I told him the lie coming easily. "There's no need for you to come all this way." The truth was, I couldn't bear the thought of seeing my mother's bored expression during what should be a celebration. David's family attended instead, cheering loudly when I received my psychology degree with honors. As I accepted my diploma, a plan began taking shape in my mind, not just for career success, but for creating the kind of life that would make my mother's rejection irrelevant, and perhaps in the process forcing her to face the consequences of her choices. It wasn't revenge exactly, at least that's not what I called it then. It was justice balanced by the knowledge I had gained about the generational nature of trauma. Whatever had broken my mother had been passed down to me, but I was determined it would stop there. With my degree in hand and a job offer from a marketing firm in Chicago, I said goodbye to California. The physical distance from both Stanford and my childhood home felt symbolic. I was charting my own course now, free from both the past and the expectations of others. Chicago welcomed me with its bold architecture and lakefront energy. At 22, I stepped into my role as a junior marketing associate with determination that impressed even seasoned colleagues. My psychology background gave me unique insight into consumer behavior, and I quickly established myself as someone who understood the emotional drivers behind purchasing decisions. "You have an uncanny ability to predict how people will respond," my first supervisor noted during a performance review. The irony wasn't lost on me. Years of hypervigilance around my mother's unpredictable moods had trained me to read subtle cues others missed. Within 18 months, I had earned my first promotion. The salary increase allowed me to move from a shared apartment to my own small but charming one-bedroom in Lakeview. Every piece of furniture, every decorative touch was selected with care. This was the first space that was truly mine, free from my mother's influence. The day I signed the lease, I called my father to share the news. Our conversations had become increasingly strained, with him serving as an uncomfortable bridge between my mother and me. "That's wonderful, honey," he said, sounding genuinely pleased. "Your mother wanted me to ask if you're contributing to a 401k yet. No congratulations from her, of course. No pride in my independence. Just concern about retirement planning at age 24. "Yes, I'm handling my finances responsibly," I replied, the old familiar disappointment washing over me despite my best efforts to remain detached. As my 20s progressed, a pattern emerged in my interactions with my mother. She would reach out only when she needed something or when social appearances demanded it. A perfunctory birthday call. Questions about tax deductions related to my student loans. Requests to know my arrival time for the rare holiday visit. During one such Christmas visit when I was 25, I noticed my father looking noticeably older, more stooped. When he excused himself to rest after dinner, citing fatigue, alarm bells rang in my mind. "Is Dad okay?" I asked my mother as we cleared the table. "He's fine. Just working too hard as usual." 6 weeks later, my brother called to tell me our father had been hospitalized with heart problems. Mom didn't want to worry you, Michael explained awkwardly. I flew home immediately, finding my father pale but stable in the cardiac unit. My mother was impeccably dressed, even in the hospital makeup perfect, as she discussed treatment options with doctors. Her composure slipped only when insurance and medical costs were mentioned. These expenses are going to be significant, she fretted. The policy has a high deductible. That moment crystallized something for me. My mother's primary concerns had always been appearance and financial security. Emotional connections were secondary at best, irrelevant at worst. Returning to Chicago after my father stabilized, I made two decisions that would shape everything that followed. First, I would accelerate my career advancement with laser focus. Financial independence wasn't just desirable, it was essential for breaking free from any leverage my mother might hold. Second, I would study my mother's vulnerabilities with the same analytical approach I applied to marketing campaigns. What did Catherine Morgan value most? Social standing. Appearances. The carefully constructed image of perfect family and professional success. The strategy took shape gradually. I worked extra hours, took on challenging projects others avoided, and networked relentlessly. Each promotion brought not just increased salary, but expanded influence in Chicago's business community. When a high-profile campaign I developed won an industry award at age 27, I made sure the press release mentioned my full name and hometown. The local Boston Business Journal picked up the story. A small mention, but enough to put my success on the radar of my mother's social circle. "I saw your name in the journal," she said during our next phone call, the first time she had initiated contact in months. "I mentioned it to the Harringtons at dinner last week." The casual comment revealed everything. The Harringtons were prominent in her social circle. She was using my success as currency in her endless quest for status. The realization didn't hurt as it once would have. Instead, it confirmed the correctness of my developing plan. My relationship with David had ended amicably after graduation, both of us recognizing I had too much healing to do before I could be a fully present partner. In Chicago, I dated casually, but maintained emotional distance, aware of my tendency to seek validation from romantic partners that should have come from within. Instead, I focused on building a chosen family of friends and mentors. Amanda Lewis, the firm's creative director, took a particular interest in my career, offering guidance that accelerated my professional growth. "You have raw talent," she told me, "but more importantly, you have hunger. Just make sure you know what you're really hungry for." Her words struck deeper than she knew. What was I hungry for? Validation, success, or something more fundamental? Proof that I was worthy of the love my mother had withheld. As my career flourished, my mother's attempts to insert herself into my success grew more transparent. Phone calls increased whenever she heard about a promotion or award. She began asking pointed questions about my salary and connections. "The Preston's daughter works in marketing in New York," she mentioned once. "Perhaps you know her firm. They might have better advancement opportunities than Chicago." I recognized the familiar pattern. Any achievement of mine was immediately followed by a subtle undermining, a suggestion that it wasn't quite enough. But now, instead of crumbling under her criticism, I simply noted it as confirmation of her predictable behavior. My social media presence became a carefully curated showcase of professional achievements and fulfilling friendships. I never posted about family or childhood memories, a deliberate omission that spoke volumes to anyone who knew how to listen. When my mother finally joined Facebook at my brother's insistence, her first action was to tag me in family photos from my childhood, attempting to retroactively create the impression of a normal, loving mother-daughter relationship. I quietly removed the tags and restricted her access to my profile. By 30, I had risen to senior marketing director, managing a team and budget that would have impressed anyone. My mother's reaction to the news was predictable. "Senior already? They must promote quickly at your company. Does this mean you'll be looking for a vice president position soon?" Nothing was ever enough. But now, instead of internalizing her dissatisfaction, I recognized it as the inevitable response of someone incapable of genuine pride in others' accomplishments. The distance, both geographical and emotional, had given me perspective she lacked. I could see the full picture of our dysfunctional family system in ways neither of my parents could. And as my father's health continued to decline, I began to understand that time for any resolution was running short. The revenge I had been unconsciously planning needed to take shape now while it could still make a difference. Not revenge in the conventional sense of causing pain or hardship. Something more sophisticated, more complete. A reckoning that would force my mother to face the reality of what she had done and what she had missed. At 32, I had achieved what many would consider the pinnacle of success. My corner office overlooked Chicago's magnificent skyline. My wardrobe consisted of designer labels I could easily afford, and industry publications regularly sought my input on marketing trends. The scared, approval-seeking girl from Boston had transformed into a confident, respected professional. This transformation occurred just as my parents' circumstances began to deteriorate. My father's ongoing health issues had forced early retirement, significantly reducing their income. Medical bills mounted despite insurance gradually depleting the savings my mother had guarded so carefully. The first call came on a Tuesday evening as I was leaving the office. "Yvonne, it's your mother." Her voice held the formal tone she always used with me, as though we were business acquaintances rather than family. "Hello, Mother. Is everything okay?" I asked, already suspecting it wasn't a social call. "Your father's medication has been changed again. The new prescription isn't fully covered by insurance. It's quite expensive." The implied request hung in the air. I waited, forcing her to actually ask rather than manipulate. "We're finding it challenging to manage these additional expenses," she finally continued. "Since you're doing so well in your career, we thought perhaps you might help temporarily." The moment I had unconsciously been preparing for had arrived. My mother needed something only I could provide. Financial security, her most treasured value. "I'd be happy to help," I said calmly. "But I think we should discuss this in person. I'll fly to Boston this weekend." The silence on her end spoke volumes. She had expected a simple transaction. Request made, money sent, power dynamic preserved with her still in control. My counteroffer disrupted her script. "That's not necessary. We can handle the details over the phone." "I insist," I replied. "This isn't just about money. We should discuss long-term planning for Dad's care." That weekend, I returned to the house that had never felt like home. My mother had aged visibly since I'd last seen her 2 years prior. Her carefully maintained appearance showed signs of strain. Hair less perfectly colored, clothing slightly outdated. My father, once robust, despite his emotional passivity, had become fragile, moving carefully as though testing the reliability of his own body. At the kitchen table, site of so many painful memories, I laid out my proposal. "I'll cover Dad's medical expenses and provide a monthly stipend," I said, "with 2 conditions." My mother's eyebrows rose slightly, the only indication of surprise on her composed face. She wasn't accustomed to conditions from the daughter who had once desperately sought her approval. "First, I want Dad to see the specialists at Northwestern in Chicago. Their cardiac care is world-class, and I have connections that can facilitate immediate treatment." Before she could object, I continued. "Second, I think it's time we address the elephant in the room. I'm willing to pay for family therapy sessions." The look of absolute horror that flashed across my mother's face would have been comical in any other context. "Therapy? That's entirely unnecessary. We're discussing financial assistance, not psychological issues." "Actually, we're discussing both," I replied evenly. "The two are connected. I've spent years understanding why our family functions the way it does. Now I'm offering resources to help fix it, but I can't do that alone." My father surprisingly spoke up. "Maybe it wouldn't hurt, Catherine. Yvonne is offering to help significantly." My mother's face hardened into the expression I knew all too well. "We'll consider the medical referral, but therapy is out of the question. I won't have strangers prying into private family matters." I had anticipated this response. "That's your choice. I'll still help with Dad's medical expenses because I care about his well-being. But the additional financial support is contingent on at least trying family counseling." The standoff that followed was predictable. My mother refused therapy but accepted the medical assistance, clearly believing she could eventually wear down my resolve regarding the other condition. What she didn't understand was how completely our power dynamic had shifted. I was no longer the child desperate for crumbs of affection. I was a successful adult offering help with clear boundaries. True to my word, I arranged for my father to see top cardiac specialists in Chicago. I used professional connections to bypass waiting lists, secured appointments with renowned experts, and even found a patient advocate to navigate the insurance complexities. All of this happened without going through my mother effectively sidestepping her need to control the situation. Meanwhile, I began building something that would have much farther-reaching implications than individual therapy sessions. Using both my marketing expertise and psychology background, I established a foundation supporting children from emotionally abusive homes. The Restoration Project provided resources for therapy, educational support, and community building for young people struggling with parental emotional neglect. The foundation launched with a gala event attended by Chicago's business elite. I made no secret of my personal connection to the cause, sharing just enough of my story and promotional materials to establish authenticity without exposing all the private details. My experience taught me that emotional neglect leaves invisible scars. Read the brochure featuring my professional headshot. The Restoration Project aims to help young people heal what others can't see. Through strategic networking, I ensured news of the foundation reached Boston's social circles. The Harringtons. My mother's cherished social connections became early donors after their niece benefited from a similar program. Their enthusiasm spread through the community my mother valued so highly. 6 months after launching the foundation, I was invited to give a keynote address at a charity event in Boston. My mother, still active in local accounting circles despite financial setbacks, would inevitably be there. I accepted without mentioning this to her. The night of the event arrived and I took the stage in a confident red-dress professional and polished in the way my mother had always emphasized, but on my own terms. From the podium, I could see her sitting with colleagues, her expression frozen in a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Good evening," I began. "I'm here to discuss something we rarely talk about in polite company, the invisible trauma of emotional neglect." For the next 20 minutes, I spoke about the psychological impact of growing up with emotionally unavailable parents. Without ever mentioning my personal experience or naming names, I described precisely what my childhood had been like and the long-term effects such environments have on children. Children raised without emotional validation often become high achievers, I explained. They believe if they can just accomplish enough, be perfect enough, they might finally earn the love that should have been freely given. It's a race without a finish line. Throughout the speech, I maintained eye contact with various audience members, occasionally including my mother. Her composed facade remained intact, but the slight trembling of her water glass betrayed her discomfort. After the event, colleagues swarmed me with compliments on the powerful presentation. My mother remained seated, visibly shaken as her friends discussed the poor children who experienced such treatment. The irony of her discomfort amid conversations about the very thing she had perpetrated was not lost on me. In the months that followed, my advocacy work gained momentum. I published an article in a major psychological journal about recognizing signs of emotional neglect. Without identifying details, I used examples from my childhood to illustrate the subtle ways such abuse manifests. The article was picked up by mainstream publications, expanding its reach beyond academic circles. When it appeared in Boston Magazine, my mother's carefully constructed social image began showing significant cracks. Friends who had read the piece connected dots I had deliberately left unconnected. Whispers started. Questions arose about why Catherine Morgan's daughter lived so far away and visited so rarely. My brother, now a college graduate working in Boston, reported the ripple effects. "Mom's behaving strangely," he said during one of our now regular phone calls. "She turned down hosting the neighborhood holiday party for the first time in 15 years, and she asked me if we had a normal childhood." The question represented the first hairline fracture in my mother's defensive wall. the first indication she might recognize that her parenting had been problematic. During Thanksgiving that year, my brother finally confronted her after witnessing her dismissive response to news of my foundation's expansion. "Do you even realize what you did to Yvonne?" he demanded. "I watched it my entire childhood. Nothing she did was ever enough for you." My mother's instinctive response was to discredit me. "Yvonne always was oversensitive. She's built an entire career exploiting family privacy for attention." The attempt backfired spectacularly. My carefully constructed professional reputation combined with the transparent authenticity of the Foundation's work made her accusations appear petty and defensive. Even my father, historically unwilling to challenge her, spoke up. "Catherine, perhaps it's time to consider that Yvonne's perspective has merit." When my mother tried to rally support from her social circle, she discovered an uncomfortable truth: her friends found my work admirable. Several had already made donations to the Foundation. One had a grandchild receiving services through a similar program. Her attempts to discredit me only isolated her further. The final confrontation came during my father's 72nd birthday. I flew to Boston bringing evidence of the Foundation's success, testimonials from young people whose lives had improved through our programs. Without accusation or anger, I placed the materials on the kitchen table. "This is what I've built from my experience," I said calmly. "I'm not trying to destroy you or our family. I'm creating meaning from pain." My mother stared at the brochures, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "Is this what you think of me, that I abused you?" "I think you did the best you could with what you had," I replied. But yes, growing up with a mother who told me she never wanted me was deeply damaging. I'm not seeking revenge. I'm seeking recognition of what happened so we can all move forward. For the first time in my memory, my mother had no immediate response. The silence stretched between us, filled with decades of unspoken hurt. "I didn't know how to be different," she finally said, her voice uncharacteristically small. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a full acknowledgement. But it was the first crack in the wall she had built between us, the first indication that my quiet revenge had accomplished what years of pleading for love never could. The truth was finally visible, not just to me, but to everyone who mattered in her world. 2 years have passed since that conversation in my parents' kitchen. I'm 34 now, looking at my life with perspective that only time and healing can provide. The journey from wounded child to empowered adult wasn't linear, and even now there are days when the old pain resurfaces unexpectedly. My mother began therapy 6 months after our confrontation. Not because she had a sudden epiphany about her parenting, but because the social pressure became too intense to ignore. Several of her friends had become enthusiastic supporters of my foundation, innocently asking her how it felt to have raised such a compassionate daughter dedicated to preventing the very trauma she had inflicted. The irony would be amusing if it weren't so sad. Our first family therapy session was painfully awkward. My mother sat rigidly in her chair, responding to the therapist's questions with minimal information. My father looked constantly on the verge of apologizing, but unsure for what exactly. I maintained the calm professional demeanor that had become my armor. "Why are we here?" the therapist asked each of us. "Because Yvonne made it a condition of her financial support," my mother answered with characteristic bluntness. "Because I want to understand what went wrong in our family," my father said. "Because I want to know if it's possible to build something new from the ruins of what never existed," I replied. Those early sessions yielded little obvious progress. My mother defended her parenting choices as practical, focused on preparing me for the real world. She dismissed emotional nurturing as coddling that created weak adults. The therapist gently challenged these assertions, introducing concepts like attachment theory and emotional validation that my mother had clearly never considered. Breakthrough came not in therapy, but after my father's health took another downturn. Facing the possibility of losing him made something shift in my mother. During a hospital visit with my father sleeping and just the two of us in the room, she spoke without her usual defenses. "I don't know how to be what you needed," she said quietly. My own mother was even colder than I was. I thought I was doing better by at least being present. It wasn't the apology I once desperately craved, but it was something more valuable: honesty. For the first time, she acknowledged the gap between what I needed and what she provided. The generational pattern of emotional neglect became clear. What she couldn't receive, she couldn't give. Meanwhile, my life in Chicago continued flourishing. The restoration project expanded to 3 additional cities, providing services to hundreds of young people from emotionally neglectful homes. My career advanced to executive level, giving me platform and resources to advocate for psychological education and support. More importantly, I found personal fulfillment beyond professional success. Alex came into my life unexpectedly, a pediatric surgeon I met through foundation work. Unlike previous relationships where I unconsciously sought the validation my mother never provided, this connection felt healthy from the beginning. Alex's calm confidence and emotional intelligence complemented my driven nature, creating balance I hadn't experienced before. "You don't need fixing," Alex told me once. "Your past shaped you, but it doesn't define you." With Alex, I began envisioning a future that included family, redefined on my terms. The fear of repeating my mother's emotional detachment had kept me from seriously considering children. Through therapy and honest self-reflection, I came to understand I could break the cycle using awareness of the past to create a different future. My relationship with my brother Michael deepened as we both worked through our distinct experiences of the same dysfunctional family system. As the favored child, his journey involved recognizing the unfairness of our mother's treatment and overcoming guilt for not protecting me more. "I knew something was wrong, but I didn't have words for it," he confessed during a weekend visit to Chicago. "I was just relieved when she focused on me instead of criticizing you." "You were a child too," I reminded him. "Neither of us should have been responsible for fixing our mother's limitations." My father's apology came during a private moment after one particularly intense therapy session. "I should have protected you," he said simply. "I failed you by staying silent." His acknowledgement meant more than I expected. The passive father who had chosen peace over protection finally saw his role in my pain. It didn't erase the past, but it validated my experience in ways my mother might never fully manage. As for my mother, our relationship remains complicated. The woman who once told me she never wanted me now makes awkward attempts at connection. She sends birthday cards with actual personal messages. She asks about my work with what seems like genuine interest. She has even on rare occasions expressed pride in my accomplishments without immediately suggesting improvements. Are these changes genuine or simply adaptations to new power dynamics? Perhaps some of both. The narcissistic patterns run deep, but her willingness to remain in therapy suggests some capacity for growth. I've learned that forgiveness isn't a single moment, but a process that fluctuates day by day. Some mornings I wake up feeling compassion for the emotionally stunted woman who did what she could with her limited capacity. Other days, the hurt child within me rages at the injustice of having to mother myself. The revenge I once unconsciously sought has transformed into something more valuable: understanding, not just of my mother's failings, but of how her treatment affected every aspect of my development. This awareness became power, allowing me to consciously choose different patterns rather than react from old wounds. The real revenge I've discovered wasn't in making my mother suffer, or even in forcing her to acknowledge her failures. It was in creating a life so full and authentic that her approval became irrelevant. It was in using my experience to help others while healing myself. It was in breaking the generational chain of emotional neglect so completely that its power could never touch future generations of my family. My foundation work continues to expand, creating ripples of healing beyond what I could have imagined. Each young person who learns to validate their own experiences and recognize they deserve love represents a victory over the pattern that dominated my childhood. Perhaps most importantly, I've learned that family isn't defined by biology, but by love freely given. The chosen family I've built, friends, colleagues, Alex Foundation kids who look to me for guidance, provides the emotional home my mother's house never was. As I look toward the future, I see possibilities rather than limitations. The little girl, desperate for her mother's love, has become a woman capable of giving love without conditions. The pain that once defined me has been transformed into purpose and compassion. Have you ever had to redefine family on your own terms? Has pain from your past ever become the catalyst for creating something beautiful? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe to our channel for more journeys of resilience, and share with someone who might need to know they're not alone in their healing journey. Remember, the most powerful revenge against those who hurt us isn't making them suffer. It's thriving despite what they did. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you strength on your own path to healing.